Welcome, everyone, to our special program, Tracking China's Growth, where we break down the first half performance of the world's second largest economy and look ahead at what's in store for the Chinese economy in the second half of the year. We'll also gauge the long-term structural drivers of the China growth story. Now, joining me on the program to discuss all of this and more is Darius Tang, Associate Director of Corporates at Fitch Bohua, as well as Michael Powers, the Zurich Insurance Group Chair Professor at Tsinghua University's School of Economics and Management. So Darius and Professor Powers, welcome to the program. We're going to be speaking to both of you in just a short moment. So it was indeed a big day in terms of China's economic data releases. The country's economic performance for the first half of the year is out, where according to the National Bureau of Statistics, China's GDP grew by 5.5% in the first 6 months of the year, reaching 59 trillion yuan, or around 8.3 trillion US dollars. Now, for the second quarter, the Chinese economy grew 6.3%. That's, of course, compared with 4.5% growth in the first quarter. Breaking it down by industry, the primary industry, or agriculture, saw output totaling 3 trillion yuan, growing by 3.7% on year in H1. The secondary industry, or the vast industrial sector's output, well, that totaled 23 trillion yuan, rising by 4.3% on year in the first half. And the tertiary industry, or services, saw output coming in at 33 trillion yuan, jumping by some 6.4% on year in the first half of 2023. Fu Linhui, a spokesperson at China's Statistics Bureau, emphasized that China's economy has demonstrated its resilience, especially in the face of a weak global economic recovery. Take a listen.
Globally, economic recovery has been sluggish since the beginning of the year, with persistent inflationary pressures. Major economies have implemented monetary tightening measures to tackle inflation, which has led to noticeable spillover effects. However, in the face of these complex external challenges, China's economy has managed to outperform major developed economies, showcasing its robust resilience in economic development.
Well, it wasn't just China's GDP numbers that were unveiled today. Our Zhu Zhu is standing by for a closer look at a series of other important economic gauges unveiled by China's Statistics Bureau today. Zhu Zhu, hi there. Break it down for us.
Thank you, Michael. Let's break down more details here. So first up, the industrial production is growing. The total value added of industrial enterprises above a designated size grew by 3.8% year-on-year in the first half of this year, showing an improvement of 0.8 percentage point compared to the first quarter. And the value added in the mining sector increased by 1.7%, manufacturing by 4.2%, and production and supply of utilities such as electricity, thermal power, gas, and water by 4.1%. Notably, the value added in the equipment manufacturing grew at a faster pace, reaching 6.5%, surpassing the industrial enterprises above the designated size by 2.7 percentage points. And investment in fixed assets also continued to grow, rising by 3.8% year-on-year in the first half of this year. Infrastructure investment increased by 7.2%, manufacturing investment by 6%, while real estate development investment saw a decrease of 7.9%. Notably, investment in high-tech industries grew substantially, with high-tech manufacturing increasing by 11.8% and high-tech services witnessing a significant of 13.9% growth. And lastly, in terms of consumption, consumer price rose year-on-year, while producer prices for industrial products dropped year-on-year. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, rose by 0.7% year-on-year in the first half of this year. Prices for food, tobacco, and alcohol increased by 2.1%, clothing by 0.8%, while housing costs decreased by 0.2%. And other categories such as articles and services for daily use, education, culture, recreation, medical services, healthcare, and other articles and services experienced varying price changes. And the total retail sales of consumer goods up by 8.2% year-on-year. On the other hand, the producer prices for industrial products dropped by 3.1% year-on-year in the first half of this year, with a further decline of 5.2% year-on-year in June. Back to you, Michael.
All right, Zhu, many thanks for that very detailed breakdown of China's H1 economic performance. But let's indeed get more on China's first half economic performance and bring in Darius Tang, Associate Director of Corporates at Fitch Bohua, and Professor Michael Powers from Tsinghua University School of Economics and Management. Professor Powers, welcome to the show. I want to start with you first. So the headline figures, China's economy growing 5.5% in the January to June period. What are your main takeaways from China's first half economic report card?
First, the 5.5% that you mentioned indicates that the economy is more or less on target for the government's projected figure of 5% for the year. This second quarter, although higher than the first quarter, somewhat lower than expectations. But 6.3% is a reasonable place to be. And I think that if one takes a longer term view and more of a technical analysis than a current events fundamental analysis, you'll see that looking over the past decade, the GDP growth figures for China have been following a very smooth curve until we get to the COVID period. And then there's, of course, several years of chaos. But we're back on the other side of that as though one's continuing that smooth curve. And in fact, the same could be said for the U.S. economy and those of other nations as well. So I think that the real lesson here is that we're coming out of the COVID period. We're on track. Yes, there are some soft spots, but I don't think that there's anything of particular concern with the current figures.
All right, so as it stands now, 5.5% for H1. China's government, of course, targeting around 5% growth for the entire year. So as it stands now, I think achievable, that target for the entire year. I want to take a look at investments right now and get to Darius, because fixed asset investments, Darius, in H1 rising by 3.8% on year. But if we take a closer look at those numbers, investment in high-tech industries, well, that grew by 12.5%. Are we seeing an accelerating structural shift, you think, in terms of China investing more higher up in the value chain?
Well, thanks, Michael. I think there is a shift in the speed of the investment, and as you will see, the high-tech investment is also one of the highlights in China's economic growth for the first half of the year. I think the Chinese government are making great efforts to accelerate the development of high-tech manufacturing. And we now have made remarkable and significant improvements. So if you look at the numbers here, in the first half of 2023, the investment in China's high-tech manufacturing industry grew by 11.8%, and it's 8% higher than the all fixed assets investment. And if you look at the PMI data, in the single month of June, the high-tech manufacturing PMI has recorded 51.2, which of course in expansionary territory, while the manufacturing PMI for all the goods is about 49, it fell behind the 59, and it's already in the contraction territory. So for my part, I think that China's high-tech manufacturing sector is gaining competitiveness. And many of our high-tech manufacturing products are widely accepted by different countries, that including United States and Europe. And these economies, you will find they become more reliant on some of the high-tech products that is originating from China. For example, the photovoltaic equipment, which China accounts for nearly 80% of the market share. And also the cars. I'm not sure if you have read the news that China has surpassed Japan in the first quarter to become the world's largest car exporter. I think it's all good news. So despite we have some challenges or obstacles, the bottlenecks such as chips, I think this is a very promising sector that warrants attention for all of us.
Yeah, and of course, China, a major exporter when it comes to solar panels, for example, lithium-ion batteries, industrial control products. So we, I think, really are seeing that shift in terms of Chinese industry producing more higher value-added goods. And just a quick clarification, I was saying investment in high-tech industries overall growing by 12.5% for the first half of the year. Darius, you were talking about specifically investment in high-tech manufacturing. investment in high-tech services, that grew, I think, north of 13%. So overall, it's about 12.5%. I do want to take a look at the longer-term story for China. Darius, I want to stick with you on that because there will always be short-term economic and business fluctuations in any economy, China's economy as well. But long-term, are you still seeing that consistent shift and focus on China pursuing higher quality development, higher quality growth, where the focus is not just about hitting those GDP targets anymore?
Well, I think the pace of the economy growth and its quality, these two things are equally important. It does not contradict to each other. And Fitch Bohua believes that we hold a positive attitude towards China's economic growth. And under our neutral assumption, that China's economic growth for the entire year of 2023 is going to be around 5.3. That is higher than the target that is set by the government, the central government, early this year. And I think for consumptions will still be playing a very important role in China's economic growth this year, while we may see maybe more substantial stimulus policies that are coming in the next half of this year. While the infrastructure investment is still a great stabilizer. And with the acceleration of the local government bonds that will be issued in the third quarter of this year, as well as the widespread use of what we call the policy-based financial instruments, I think in the second half of the year, the infrastructure investment in China would maintain a relatively stable growth rate. However, the property market, I'm afraid it may still enter the path of a contraction, but the drop may be narrowed. And for export, I'm sorry, there is not too many good news as the United States, the Federal Reserve, is hiking its interest rates and the actual demand is relatively weak. So I think although there are some challenges ahead, I still maintain a rather positive attitude towards the economic development, I think in the second half of the year, China's economic growth rate would maintain a reasonable range with high quality and a healthy growth rate.
All right, Darius, so you mentioned stimulus policies. We're going to come back to that in just a second, specifically in terms of policies with regard to speeding up consumption's recovery, and we're going to talk about foreign trade a little bit later on as well. Professor Powers, I want to come back to you. If you want to add on to anything that Darius has said, feel free to do that. But I also want to ask you, in recent months, we've seen China's consumer prices. Well, CPI has shown a downward trend recently, and some outside of China are now somewhat concerned that the country is perhaps showing deflationary trends. In response, China's central bank has said that China's economy continues to grow and does not show signs of deflation and will start to pick up starting next month. Do you agree with the Chinese central bank's assessment?
I think I would more or less agree. I think that what we saw with the dramatic growth in inflation in the United States and some parts of Europe, there actually was concern for a time that some of this inflation might be exported to China. Well, that hasn't happened. What has happened is that some of the softness, some of the weakness in the Western economies has resulted in less demand for Chinese goods, which has resulted in a smaller increase in GDP growth this quarter than some would have anticipated. So I think that what we imported was perhaps some of the weakness in demand, but not the problem with inflation. Now, the reason inflation could be, or one reason inflation could be a problem is in terms of consumer demand. If we get into a very low period of inflation or even a deflationary economy, there's this concern that people will just hold on to their money. They won't go out and invest, and that won't stimulate further growth in the economy. And we do have this concern domestically, the domestic part of the demand issue, is that already consumers are somewhat reluctant to invest and make purchases. So this is clearly something that will be of concern in the next half of the year. I think I agree with Darius, his general assessment. I would point out that this transition from a manufacturing engine to more sophisticated, high quality manufacture has been going on for years. This is what I was talking about when I was referring to the gradual decrease in the GDP figures for China. The reason that those are coming about is that the economy has been changing, and we're going to continue to see that change in the near future. But what I wanted to emphasize is that we're really, it appears to me, we're really back on track to where we were in the pre-COVID period. And I think that the concerns that we have to face, one, are domestic demand, consumer demand, and two, weaknesses in external economies.
All right, Professor Powers, Darius, many thanks for your thoughts on all of that. Stay with us. Back to you two in just a moment. In the meantime, let's get a closer look at the equity markets here on the Chinese mainland. Tim Pope joins us live from Shanghai with the latest. Afternoon, Tim. Take us through how the Chinese mainland markets started out the week, please.
Cheers, Michael. The Chinese mainland markets did open lower today. Investors seem to be holding on to their wallets and waiting to see what kind of stimulus measures the Chinese leaders decide to approve at high-level meetings later in the month. The Shanghai Composite Index closed about 0.9% lower. The Shenzhen component shed about 0.6%. We saw the utilities sector was the only really broad sector in the positive today, with predicted higher demand for electricity as extremely hot weather continues to grip many parts of China. Power producer Huaneng was one of the top gainers on the Shanghai Composite Index today, rising by about 2%. While there was a broad pullback by investors on most other sectors today, we did see gains for Chinese pork producers. The hog breeder Wen's Foodstuffs added 1.8%. That came after reporting pork sales jumping almost 38% year on year last month, and only reporting a slight drop-off in poultry sales. China, of course, consumes around half of the world's pork, and official data showed that the country's domestic output in Q2 was the strongest quarterly pork production in a decade. Around the region more broadly, there wasn't a lot to see today, with the Hong Kong markets closed. That's as the city prepares for the arrival of Typhoon Talim, and Tokyo's markets closed as well for the Ocean Day public holiday. Futures trading, though, suggests Japanese markets could open lower tomorrow. But elsewhere in Asia today, we saw falls for Korea's Kospi and a slight dip for the Australian ASX. European markets also started the day a bit lower, with commodity shares pulling down the Stoxx 600 in early trade. That's it from me for today, Michael. Back to you in Beijing.
All right, Tim, many thanks for that update. As always, Tim Pope for us there in Shanghai. All right, here's a quick look at some of the other key highlights of the Chinese economy in the first half of the year. The number of tourists visiting Beijing this summer is soaring. Official data shows visitors have grown 4.5 times compared to 2019 as of July 3rd. Our Dai Kai visits some of the most popular tourist attractions here in the city to get a sense of what it currently feels like to travel in the Chinese capital. Take a look.
Hey guys, I'm right outside the gate of the Palace Museum, an iconic landmark anyone who comes to Beijing simply has to visit. Tours take around 4 hours, but to do that under current temperature of around 40 degrees Celsius is just unthinkable. And yet still, it's as crowded as ever. To get in, you can't just waltz up anytime and grab a ticket. It just doesn't work like that, especially over the summer vacation. Instead, you need to book tickets about 7 days in advance, and as you can see on my phone, it's currently all sold out. I can't really complain. After all, hundreds of millions of people in China hit the road over the summer. To get a ticket to the Palace Museum, you gotta be as fast as lightning when making a reservation. Remember, you aren't just competing with local residents here in Beijing, but tourists from all across China and even the world, so it's not so simple. After hitting a brick wall, I just want to grab a quick bite for dinner and leave. A friend tells me there's a place nearby to eat Peking duck, one of Beijing's most iconic dishes, and my map tells me I'm about to arrive in a minute or so. Same thing here. It says there are 139 people waiting in line. If I'm lucky, I might be able to get a table in 2 hours. It's clear the number of tourists have skyrocketed in Beijing this summer compared to previous years. As of July the 3rd, data from travel agencies show booking to Beijing's top tourist attractions increased by a whopping 2.6 times compared to last month, and they've grown 4.5 times compared to 2019. I'm not sure if you're traveling this summer, but if you visit the Chinese capital, make sure you book everything beforehand. That way you'll save tons of time. But then again, waiting for an hour or two is probably the new normal. Wherever you go, just prepare to be patient. But then again, it's probably also part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, I can definitely confirm the restaurants and tourist attractions here in Beijing are definitely packed. So for more on China's domestic demand, I want to bring back Darius Tang, Associate Director at Fitch Bohua. So let's talk about consumption, Darius. What were your key takeaways for China's consumption in the first half of the year?
Well, according to government data released today, China's retail sales consumption goods rose by, is 8.2 in the first half of the year. It is down from 9.3 that is recorded from January to May. And I think if you look at the itemized data by consumption type, the catering consumption, which has enjoyed very high growth rate, over 20%. I think this is a very inspiring number, and I think it's also in line with its eye-catching PMI performance. While if you look at the goods retails increased by 6.8 compared to the first half of last year. Well, I think, in my view, the consumption, it goes without saying that the consumption is playing a very central role in China's economic recovery, and I think it determines the pace and the quality of the economic revival. But now we have to admit that we have facing headwinds. And there are challenges, the challenges that is coming from the relatively weak or sluggish internal demand. And I think this can be reflected in the data that is released this morning. If you look at the retail sales, the growth rate for the single month of June is only 3.1%. It's well below that is recorded in May. I think these are the challenges we have to face.
So that in terms of policies needed, Darius, to speed up and perhaps strengthen domestic consumption's recovery, what are you looking for?
Well, I think in order to make sure the consumption momentum is not fading, I think the stimulus policies, more substantial stimulus policies may be more required. And Fitch Bohua has noticed that there are some policies that is taking effect right now. For example, you see the car sales, especially new energy car sales, it increased by 45% in the first half of the year. It's also a very inspiring, very high growth rate. And we are also keeping a very close eye on the Politburo meeting that is going to be held in the late July to see if there are any good news that would bring to the market more shopping coupons, hopefully. And I think the consumption, China has a very huge potential for consumption. And our task right now is how to unleash such potential to the utmost, say, to increase the residents' income or to lowering the unemployment for young people, to help those who just graduated from their schools, and upticking in the consumer's confidence to divert more excessive savings to the spending. I think this is all the important task ahead for us to do to step up our economy.
I mean, urban incomes are still growing at a very healthy pace. Rural incomes are growing at a very robust pace as well. And you mentioned the potential of consumption. 400 million plus in terms of the middle income, and China plans to double that to 800 million plus by 2035. So in terms of the potential consumption power here in China, I think it's absolutely massive. But perhaps that's a topic for another day. Darius, thank you so much for your insights on this. Darius Tang, Associate Director of Corporates at Fitch Bohua. Thank you, Michael. Well, small and medium-sized enterprises play a crucial role in China's economy. Now, despite relentless competition from larger companies, SMEs still have unique advantages that enable them to thrive. Our Ho Jing explores how a small company called Nano AR is making its mark on the global market with specialized high-tech products.
Transparent film displays in shopping malls, subways, exhibitions, fitness at home, and cars, with interactive functions too.
If I hadn't seen these all by myself, it would be surprising to know how AR technologies have been so integrated into our daily lives. What's even more surprising is that all these advanced technologies are being developed by a small company in China.
Photonic Crystal Technology Company is a small high-tech company in Shenzhen. It boasts a complete supply chain of transparent display under the brand Nano AR, with only around 50 employees.
伟大的企业，本质上来讲。
All great companies start small. We can see that the world's top 10 enterprises have been changing in the past 2 to 3 decades. High-tech companies are making up a larger proportion of the top 10, with innovation being fundamental to all of them.
其实它是在变化的。
As a special economic zone, Shenzhen is one of the ideal places for private companies, especially small and medium ones, to run their businesses.
政府会提供很多。
The local government has offered a lot of support to early-stage startups, especially tech companies like us. For example, they would waive rental fees. Also, private companies are a dynamic part of Shenzhen's economy. There is an established ecosystem that makes it easy to find clients or partners.
As the saying goes, science and technology are the primary production forces. As the head of overseas sales and marketing, Danny said in a both confident and modest way that the job is quite easy, as the company provides a unique product to the market.
We already have sales, or to say POC projects around the United States and also in Europe, and also including Japan and South Asia countries.
Even as a startup, Nano AR is dedicated to education and public welfare. For example, they offered their AR product for free to local museums.
For traditional displays, the cultural relics just stood still, so they were not that vivid. Thanks to this AR display, the cultural relics are brought to life. Many children and adults really enjoyed this new form of exhibition.
Just as young people are considered the future of a country, SMEs like Nano AR are also seen as a beacon of hope for China's economic development. 侯静 CGTN 深圳广东 Province.
To China's foreign trade, where, according to China's National Bureau of Statistics, the country's imports and exports of goods continue to grow in the first half of the year. Now, despite the downturn in global trade and weakening demand, the volume and quality of China's foreign trade improved steadily, in line with expectations. Take a listen.
During the first half of the year, the volume of traded goods reached over 20 trillion yuan, or $2.8 trillion, with an increase of over 2.1% compared to the previous year. Imports and exports of private enterprises increased by 8.9%, accounting for nearly 53% of the total, an increase of 3.3 percentage points over the same period last year. In the next stage, although the contraction pressure on external demand continues, China's foreign trade is still expected to withstand the pressure and fully achieve the goal of promoting stability and improving quality.
And let's get more on China's foreign trade and bring in our Miro Liu in Singapore and bring back Professor Michael Powers of Tsinghua University. Miro, I want to start with you. Singapore is, of course, part of ASEAN, and ASEAN is now China's largest trading partner. So give us the lay of the land when it comes to China-ASEAN trade, especially as both are now part of the world's largest free trade agreement, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
Hello, Michael. Now, I will share some statistics that will explain this question perfectly. Now, in the year of 2000, China's trade with ASEAN was mere $40 billion. In 2019, that figure was $641 billion. Post-pandemic in 2022, China's trade with ASEAN had grown to $975 billion. That's almost $1 trillion. So from $40 billion to nearly $1 trillion, trade between China and ASEAN has grown 25 times in just 20 years. It is now the largest trading relationship between any two economic entities. And just to put things into perspective, in comparison, for the same period of time, US-ASEAN trade had grown 3 times, from 130 billion to 380 billion in the same 20 years. Now, China and ASEAN are now in negotiation for an upgraded free trade agreement and a full implementation of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership you mentioned. This is a trade bloc that includes China, South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and 10 ASEAN member states. In a recent media interview with China Daily on July 14th, former Chinese Foreign Minister Madam Fu Ying said China's bilateral trade with 13 other RCEP member countries, where the RCEP agreement has come into force, reached $1.85 trillion, up 7.5% year on year, accounting for nearly 30% of the value of China's total imports and exports. Rates of growth in China's trade to the 8 RCEP member countries exceeding double digits, and rates of growth of its trade to some ASEAN countries, namely Indonesia, Singapore, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos, exceeded 20%. Madam Fu went on to say that the RCEP not only provides a broader platform for regional development, but also brings new areas of growth such as blue economy, green economy, and digital economy infrastructure, expanding new space for upgraded collaboration and paving new ways for high-quality collaboration between China and ASEAN. So these are some very impressive figures. Now, if you ask scholars and historians like Professor Kishore Mahbubani and Professor Wang Gangwu here in Singapore, they will tell you that there is a strong lineage and historical connection between China and Southeast Asia, dating back to when Zheng He came down to this part of the world. And we're surely seeing a resurgence of trade and exchanges between China and ASEAN. Michael.
Yeah, well, the China-ASEAN trade numbers, that is now larger than the transatlantic trade between the United States and the European Union. Fascinating stuff. Miro, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks for your report and breakdown of the numbers between China and ASEAN when it comes to trade. Thank you. Professor Powers, I want to come to you. What do you see then as the biggest challenges to China's foreign trade in the second half of the year, and how resilient do you think China's foreign trade will be?
I think the biggest challenges have to do with weaknesses in some of the Western economies. Simply put, if economies are cooling, people are not buying as much, they're not going to be importing as many goods from China and other places, and that will have an impact on the sales, the exports that China has. Referring to your previous story, I think it's quite interesting. That this growth between China and ASEAN is quite remarkable, and in a sense, the United States, which is trying to keep a cap on China's growth and perhaps its success, better be careful for what it's wishing for, because the growth to the Chinese economy is coming from other parts of the world, not just from demand from the United States and Europe.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks for your thoughts, as always, Professor Powers. That was Professor Powers of Tsinghua University School of Economics and Management. Thank you. Meanwhile, we spoke to several foreign executives who expressed their confidence in the future prospects of China's economic development. Now, they aim to further engage with the Chinese market and expand their business presence in the country. Here's what they had to say.
Coming to China, you realize the magnitude of the opportunity. It gives a renewed, energy to go and now try to be present on the market.
Investments in China at the resort and the ability to get to resorts, we will certainly see that grow. We're just at I still believe that the beginning stages of what will definitely be the largest winter sports industry in the world within 5 years.
China is really growing. China was a fast-growing emerging market back then, and now China has become a much more a robust economy.
And earlier today, China unveiled its latest jobs data. Our Yu Bo-Kun is here with more. Bo-Kun.
Thank you, Michael. So recent data indicates that China's labor market continued to show signs of improvement. In the first half of 2023, the surveyed urban unemployment rate reached 5.3%, marking a decrease of 0.2 percentage point compared with the first quarter. Well, in June alone, the jobless rate stood at 5.2%, the same as in May. Well, notably, the surveyed unemployment rate among the young people who aged between 16 and 24 was higher at 21.3%. On the other hand, the majority of the labor market who aged between 25 to 59 experienced a lower unemployment rate of 4.1%. Well, China's economy has undergone significant structural changes recently, representing both opportunities and challenges for the youth in the labor market. As the job landscape evolved, there is an increasing need to equip the young individuals with necessary skills to succeed in this changing environment. To gain more insight into this reality that young people are facing, I spoke with 3 individuals with totally different background about their job hunting stories. Take a look. Disinfecting, locating blood vessels, and administering injections were part of Zhang Ji's daily routine when he was studying nursing at school. Now, he's fulfilling his dream as a male nurse at one of Beijing's premier hospitals.
After submitting my resume to 10 hospitals, I was invited for an interview by half of them. This outcome was expected and in line with my aspirations.
When asked about his job search process, Zhang said that was not a difficult journey for him, as his major had prepared him very well to enter the job market.
The skills I have acquired are highly sought after in today's job market. The practical nature of my training has equipped me with ample hands-on experience.
Zhang's smooth job search experience can be attributed to China's efforts to strengthen the connection between education institutions and the job market. Many new majors, such as housekeeping services and smart elderly care, are being introduced to ensure that students are equipped with skills to meet the demands of today's job market. However, not all graduates are fortunate enough to have an easy job search process.
It was challenging. I have sent out almost 50 resumes, and it took an entire year for me to finally land on my dream job at an international organization.
China is anticipating a record number of graduates entering the job market, with almost 12 million students graduating from universities and colleges.
This year's graduating class is characterized by a proactive attitude toward their job search, while still prioritizing job security. A growing number of job opportunities are available in the manufacturing and digital sectors.
The common perception of youth unemployment rate is often focused on college students. However, this group only takes a small portion of the large population. Official data shows that the majority of individuals between ages of 16 to 24 who are considered part of the labor market are actually individuals with lower education, like young migrant workers. Well, in order to gain a comprehensive understanding of the youth labor market, I visited a construction site in Bazhou, Hebei province to talk to a young migrant worker. According to him, finding a job was not a difficult task.
I have been working here for 6 months. I earn over 300 yuan per day. I believe that as long as I possess the necessary skills, I will always have job opportunities.
One of the primary challenges facing employment today are structural conflict, stemming from China's ongoing efforts to modernize and upgrade its manufacturing sector. The industry alone employs nearly a quarter of all young workers, hence the importance of possessing strong vocational skills for prospective employees.
The advent of high-end manufacturing requires the gradual shifting of labor from low-end to high-end sectors, which cannot be accomplished all at once. A significant amount of time and resources must be invested in extensive training programs that will enable the workforce to meet the demands of the rapidly evolving job market.
So by investing in education and training, we can ensure that the youth are well prepared to meet the demands for the job market, both now and in the future. Well, in light of the need for a large number of talents during the process of high-quality development, China has made a firm commitment to support employment among the youth. To gain more insight into this effort, I spoke with officials from the government and the universities to find out what measures has been taken to help the youth. Take a look. So helping young people to land on a job is always on the top of the list for the government. I'm now visiting one of Beijing's job fair to see how has job hunting fared for the youth and the employers. At this job fair organized by the Beijing government, more than 100 companies ranging from tech-oriented startups to state-owned enterprises are present to attract talent.
With many students set to leave campus soon, it is our duty to continue supporting their job search. Beijing has already hosted more than 210 job fairs in the first half of the year, demonstrating our commitment to providing students with ample employment opportunities.
Ding said that the job market for young people in Beijing has been relatively stable this year.
But during my exploration of the job fair, I spoke with several recruiters, most of whom revealed that while their company has not decreased the number of job openings, there has been a significant increase in number of job seekers compared to previous year. Given that this year sees a record number of graduates, the government is taking further steps to enhance its efforts to stabilize youth employment. In addition to the government, universities play a vital role in promoting youth employment. During the graduation season, Tsinghua University in China has implemented a multifaceted approach. As a result, over 90% of the students have successfully secured employment opportunity thus far.
Our employment rate at Tsinghua University is notably high, but our attention is focused on the structure of our students' employment opportunities. This year, over 20% more students have opted to work in China's western region, as we continue to encourage graduates to consider career opportunities in the manufacturing and energy sectors. In fact, students who pursue careers in these industries have experienced a 60% and 30% increase in job opportunities, respectively.
It's important to acknowledge that youth employment is not solely measured by the number of individuals who have signed contracts with companies. The emergence of new media has allowed young people to explore alternative career paths, like this vlogger. Xiujin has been a vlogger for 3 years.
As a vlogger, I find great satisfaction in producing content and documenting my life for others to enjoy. Working for myself rather than a large corporation is a primary reason why I opted for this career path. Additionally, I'm pleased to report that my earnings as a vlogger have been profitable.
The rise of self-employment has encouraged younger generations to establish careers that suit their personal ambitions. Many like Xiujin are grateful for the opportunity to turn their passion into a career and do what they love to make a living.
And also here on Global Business, we've been speaking to industry experts to get their take and advice to land a successful job in today's labor market. So before we go, here's what they had to say. Take a listen.
I think be very open-minded. I think China is becoming part of the global stage. So as you're getting your job here, it's not just about China. Just like my job in America is not about just about the United States. It's a global world. And I would encourage them to be open-minded and willing to learn and willing to grow. And I think there's a big world out there, and hopefully they can go see it.
My advice is to be very open-minded because there are so many changes. I mean, you just mentioned about ChatGPT. There is such a tremendous revolution in AI in various aspects, in various sectors, from energy transition to autonomous transportation, etc., etc. So we are in a world where things are changing so fast that if you don't stay agile with an open-minded, you risk yourself to be left aside from these major trends.
Be patient and find something meaningful and find something exciting for you, not just going after the money. Of course, money is really important, so don't discount money, but never really go after something just because of money. Because in the long run, eventually you will get the money back.
If you're just graduating, fresh out of university, and you're in the tech space, then look at London. London's tech scene is vibrant, it's diverse, and it's got lots of opportunities for bright young graduates. So please look at London.